Imagine waking up tomorrow to find out that the only reason you're still alive is because one man decided to break the rules. Not a president, not a general, not some decorated hero with medals on his chest. Just a middle-aged Soviet officer sitting in a dark bunker, staring at a screen that suddenly screamed, "Launch detected. American nuclear missile incoming." Then a second missile appeared, then a third, then 5. The computer insisted, "The United States has started a nuclear war." And protocol said he had minutes to confirm it to the Kremlin, which would trigger an immediate Soviet retaliation and end human civilization forever. But on that night, September 26, 1983, Stanislov Petrov sat back, looked at the warning, and said, "No, something's wrong." He reported it as a false alarm. He had no proof, no data, no guarantee, just a gut feeling and the courage to trust it. If he had followed the rules, if he had even hesitated, you wouldn't be watching this video. I wouldn't be here to tell this story. Billions of people would have vanished from the face of Earth in minutes. This is the story of the spy who stopped World War III, and why the world came closer to nuclear annihilation in 1983 than almost any other moment in history. A moment governments tried to bury, a moment almost no one learned about until decades later. A moment that proved the scariest truth of all. Our survival sometimes depends on someone making a split-second decision, and on one night, nobody did nothing better than Stanislav Petrov. To understand why that night was so deadly, we need to step back, because 1983 wasn't a normal year. It was the year the Cold War stopped being cold and became something much closer to a slow-motion apocalypse. Both superpowers were paranoid, both expected an attack, and both were armed to the teeth. In the US, President Ronald Reagan had just called the Soviet Union the evil empire. He was pushing the Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars, a futuristic laser-based missile shield. The Soviets thought it was preparation for a first strike. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was collapsing in slow motion, economically, politically, strategically. Their military was overstretched, their technology lagged behind, and their leaders believed that America might attempt a first strike to finish them off while they were vulnerable. Yuri Andropov, a hardliner who saw the CIA behind every tree, believed the Americans were genuinely preparing for nuclear war. Both sides had missiles that could cross the planet in 20 to 25 minutes. That meant, if a computer ever said, "incoming nukes," leaders had mere minutes to decide whether to end the world or gamble it wasn't real. But one thing was certain, the first to fire would be the second to die. And in the midst of all this adversary, the Soviets did something that pushed the USA and President Ronald Reagan over the edge. Only weeks before the night we're about to explore, a Soviet fighter jet had shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007, a civilian passenger plane, killing 269 people, including a US congressman. The Soviets said they thought it was a plane on a spy mission. The world was horrified. Reagan was furious, and the Soviets felt cornered, terrified the Americans would retaliate. The tension was so high that a single mistake, a single glitch, a single nervous trigger finger could ignite a global firestorm. Nuclear warheads pointed directly at each other, waiting for the smallest misstep, the tiniest spark, to ignite a war that neither side can win. And that firestorm nearly began during the NATO exercise Able Archer 83, a war drill so realistic the Kremlin thought it might be cover for an actual first strike. Soviet bombers were armed, missiles put on standby. In declassified documents, US officials later admitted, "We didn't realize the Soviets actually believed we might attack." This was the backdrop, a world in which fear was stronger than logic. And in the middle of this geopolitical power keg was something new, something shiny and expensive and untested. A state-of-the-art Soviet satellite warning system called OKO, designed to detect US missile launches from space. It was supposed to be the most advanced early warning technology on Earth, but there was a problem. It had never been tested under real war conditions. It had never experienced real missile launches. It was brand new. And like any new system in 1983, it had bugs, blind spots, and flaws that no one fully understood yet. Still, the Soviet military believed in it, trusted it, and put their faith in it. And on the night of September 26th, the entire fate of civilization would be placed in its imperfect hands. Or rather, in the hands of the man watching over it. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Stanislov Petrov. He wasn't supposed to be on duty. He'd filled in for someone else at the last minute. Petrov was known for being calm, smart, and level-headed, a thinker more than a soldier. He had training as an engineer and a scientist, not a traditional military background. Some officers didn't like that about him. He asked too many questions, he thought too much. But tonight, that problem would become humanity's salvation. Petrov didn't see himself as a hero. He didn't even think his job was particularly glamorous. In fact, for years he'd considered his career somewhat mundane, somewhere between engineering and military bureaucracy. But make no mistake, this man's job was deadly serious. He wasn't a soldier on the front line. He wasn't a general in a conference room. He was something far more dangerous, someone whose job was to interpret the literal signals that could start a nuclear war and end the human race forever. Petrov worked for the Soviet Early Warning System, a highly secretive, incredibly complex network of satellites, ground radar, and computer models designed to detect incoming US nuclear missiles. His job was simple on the surface. If he saw an attack, he reported it. And once he reported it, the Soviet response was automatic. The doctrine was brutal but simple. If America attacks, the USSR must launch everything immediately, before their own missiles are destroyed. There was no time to check, no time to debate, no time to think. Petrov understood the weight of this responsibility. He understood it so well that it sometimes kept him awake at night. And yet, on September 25, 1983, he walked into work like any other shift. Petrov's workstation was buried deep beneath the ground, a massive, reinforced military facility known as Serpukhov 15. This bunker was the nerve center of the Soviet Union's nuclear early warning satellites, a nerve cluster of blinking lights, screens, cables, and devices that all served one purpose: detect an attack, report it, retaliate instantly. When Petrov arrived, the atmosphere in the bunker was the same as always: tense, sanitized, artificial. The air smelled like old electronics and stale coffee. The lighting was fluorescent, harsh, making everyone look slightly paler, slightly more tired than they actually were. Around him, officers sat at their stations, their faces illuminated by green and red screens, their fingers hovering over keyboards that would broadcast messages to every branch of the Soviet military. These men were not allowed to panic, not allowed to hesitate, not allowed to make mistakes. But every single one of them knew that a single error could kill millions. Petrov took his seat. He adjusted his headphones. He scanned his monitors, rows of data, satellite readings, coded signals, radar charts. He checked the communication line that connected him directly to the Soviet High Command. Every shift began this way, calm, silent, like the world holding its breath. And on this night, the world had every reason to. The system Petrov oversaw was called Oko, meaning the eye. It was one of the Soviet Union's most advanced pieces of military technology, a satellite-based early warning system designed to detect the infrared signature of missile launches from the United States. If an American missile left its silo, whether in Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, or anywhere else, the satellites would see the heat. They would send a signal. A computer would interpret it. An alarm would sound. And Petrov would be the first man on Earth to know that the apocalypse had begun. Oko was new, unproven, glitchy. Petrov knew this. His commanders knew it. But the political leadership did not want to hear it. The technology had been rushed into service because the Soviets feared America's rapid advances. New missile guidance systems, new submarine capabilities, new stealth technology. To the Soviet military, this satellite system wasn't just hardware, it was hope, a sense of safety, a promise of not being caught off guard. But to Petrov, it was a liability, a prototype pretending to be perfect. He trusted his own mind far more than he trusted the machines. Now, let's slow down the clock. Let's step into Petrov's mind as the night unfolds. He sits in his chair, papers neatly arranged in front of him, radios quietly hissing with static. The room feels normal, boring even. Officers chat softly, someone drinks tea, a printer rattles in the background, printing yet another line of routine data. Nothing seems out of the ordinary. Then, a single alarm pierces the room. A harsh, metallic scream, one that no one ever wants to hear. Red lights begin to flash. Every conversation stops. Chairs scrape the floor as officers leap to their workstations. Screens turn bright. Data streams shift. A single word appears on the main console. Launch. In a split second, the bunker shifts from casual boredom to absolute terror. According to the satellite system, the United States has launched a nuclear missile. One missile, heading directly toward the Soviet Union. Petrov stared at the word glowing on the screen. His breathing slowed. His brain began calculating possibilities. Could this be real? Was this a test? Was this the beginning of the end? But the alarm had not sounded yet. This was not the full alert. This was something else. A warning, a whisper, a shadow. In the next 60 seconds, the answer would come. Petrov felt a chill run down his back. He leaned forward, and that was when the alarm, the real alarm, exploded through the bunker. The room erupts, phones ring, people shout, orders fly across the room like bullets. Petrov stands frozen for a moment, then snaps into action. This is his job. If a missile is coming, he has to report it. And within minutes, the Soviet leadership will launch a full nuclear retaliation. There's no time for debate, no time for hesitation. That's how nuclear war works. You can't wait and see if the explosion actually happens. You strike back before you're destroyed. But something about the alert bothers Petrov. One missile? Just one? That doesn't make sense. In every simulation, every war game, every briefing he'd ever attended, a US first strike would involve hundreds of missiles, thousands. You don't start nuclear war with a single rocket. You overwhelm your enemy. You destroy their command centers. You cripple their ability to respond. This just doesn't fit. But he can't rely on gut feeling alone. He needs data. He turns to his officers. Check the satellite feed. They do. Everything confirms the same thing. Missile launched. Impact expected in minutes. The system is shouting that this is real, but Petrov hesitates. He looks around the room. He sees fear in every face, uncertainty in their eyes. And he knows, he absolutely knows, that if he calls this in as an attack, the Soviet Union will launch a full nuclear counterstrike. Millions dead, cities erased, the planet altered forever. So he waits. 5 seconds, 10, 20. Every second feels like his throat is being crushed by a hand he can't see. And then, the alarm goes off again. Another missile, then another, and another. 5 missiles total. 5 American nuclear missiles, according to the Soviet system, are already on their way. At this point, panic sweeps the bunker. 5 missiles is enough to destroy multiple cities, enough to cripple leadership, enough to be a strategic first strike. Every shred of logic says, report it now. Sound the alarm. Start the counterstrike. Petrov's officers stare at him, waiting for orders, breathing heavily, terrified. Their hands shake over their keyboards. Some glance nervously toward the phones that connect directly to Soviet high command. One call from Petrov, and it's over. Not just for them, not just for the Soviet Union, but for the entire world. Petrov later said this moment felt like standing on the edge of a cliff in total darkness, hearing the wind roar, knowing that one wrong step will plunge you into a pit you can never escape from. His training screamed, follow protocol, trust the system, report the attack. His instincts whispered, something isn't right. And in this unbearable tension, in this impossible moment, Petrov made a decision that no one else in that bunker would have dared to make. He ignored the system. He refused to report the launch. he picked up the phone to high command with the world hanging in the balance and said the words that could have gotten him executed. "It is a false alarm." Silence on the line. Then a single, cold question. "Are you certain?" Petrov swallowed, heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He wasn't certain. He had no proof, no radar confirmation, no second satellite verification, just a feeling, a hunch, a belief that the system, this new, shiny, untested system, had made a mistake. He took a breath, steadied himself, and answered, "Yes, it is false." And that was it. He hung up. The officers around him stared in disbelief, and all they could do was wait. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 17 minutes. If the missiles were real, they would hit. And everyone in that bunker would know Petrov had been wrong. He would go down in history as the man who let his country die. A single bead of sweat rolled down a young officer's temple as he said, almost whispering, "Should we notify the general staff?" That was code for, "Should we prepare to retaliate?" The question hovered in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Petrov didn't answer. The United States had launched, and yet, Petrov didn't believe it. He couldn't. Because if he was right, he'd save the world. But if he was wrong, he'd doom it. The officers around him looked terrified, and in that bunker, terror wasn't a weakness. It was normal, expected. One young analyst stared at Petrov with trembling lips. "Sir, we need to report. If this is real." "If this were real," Petrov cut in softly, "the Americans wouldn't send 5 missiles." The room blinked. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't unsure. He was explaining, teaching, holding the entire bunker together with his voice alone. "They would send everything they have," he continued. "Hundreds, thousands, not 5. He paused. The officers exchanged glances. Because he was right. The United States wouldn't risk retaliation by launching a tiny, symbolic first strike. They would go full force, remove the Soviet Union before it could respond. But still, 5 missiles was not nothing. 5 missiles could destroy 5 cities, 5 command centers, 5 million lives, and Petrov knew that. So why wasn't he reporting it? He took a slow breath. Because something about the alerts bothered him, something deep, something intuitive. The missile trajectories were clean, too clean. But now that he had reported it as a false alarm, there was nothing to do but wait. Minutes passed like seconds. Petrov just stared at the clock on the wall. 5 minutes. 3 minutes. 1. Every nerve in the bunker tightened until it felt like the air would crack. Petrov kept breathing. If he was wrong, impact would happen now and wipe the Soviet Union and all its people from the face of the earth. Silence. Nothing. No explosion. No shock wave. No seismic reading. No radar contact. Just silence. Then the officer on duty looked up from his console and whispered, "No impact detected." Another analyst confirmed, "No explosion signatures anywhere." Then a third voice, "Sir, it was a false alarm." The bunker exhaled as if the world itself had been holding its breath. Some officers put their hands on their heads. Others collapsed into chairs. A few laughed in disbelief. Petrov didn't react. He just closed his eyes. Calm, exhausted, relieved. Not for himself, but for the millions of people above ground who would never know how close they came to dying tonight. He whispered to no one, "I knew it." But the truth was, he didn't know. He decided. Decided against the machine, against protocol, against fear, against the Cold War itself. And because of that choice, the world kept spinning. Petrov had been right. He had saved the world, but hardly anyone would know it. Not for years, not until long after the Soviet Union collapsed. Petrov died in 2017, alone, quietly, in a small apartment outside Moscow. There was no state funeral, no worldwide broadcast, no monuments. 2 years later, he was honored with a plaque at the Uber House. Russia does not. The event is kept quiet, almost erased. His own headstone says nothing about the night he prevented a nuclear war. No credit, no mention, just silence. 4 decades after his decision, the world drifts back toward the same danger. The nuclear agreements forged in the late 80s have mostly vanished, expired, abandoned, or ignored. The global safety system built during that period has all but fallen apart. Now, nearly every nation with nuclear weapons is expanding and upgrading its arsenal. In 2025, the doomsday clock sits at 89 seconds before midnight, the closest humanity has ever been to annihilation, according to leading nuclear experts. Then again, perhaps not as close as on that September night long ago. Petrov spent the rest of his life reminding the world of one truth: our greatest threat is human error. These weapons don't launch themselves. Someone has to give the command. And people, no matter who they are, can always be wrong.